Florida, where defendant Brendan Depa is being sentenced today.
Now, he's the teen with autism who beat his teacher unconscious over a Nintendo Switch in February of 2023.
There's a video of exactly what happened. Video says it all. He was charged as an adult, and then he did plead guilty to 1 count of aggravated battery of a school employee in October.
All right, let's get you back into that courtroom now, where autism disorder specialist Kimberly Spence is on the stand for the defense.
So in your estimation, again, based on your review and your experience, training, et cetera, how does autism affect Brendan?
I think the deepest impact for Brendan has been he has a lot of anxiety. I know he has a co-occurring diagnosis related to that, but I think there's a lot of anxiety with changes. There's a lot of anxiety related to when the routine is not followed. He has a lot of social difficulty. He has currently, outside of the people that have spoken in this room today, he doesn't have friends. He reported to me he wants to have friends, that he has always struggled with making friends. He struggled with socially understanding the kinds of behaviors that he needs to fit in and interact with others. I think that he has very significant theory of mind deficits, essentially understanding the perspectives of others. I think he, in many instances, he perceives things in a way, and there's a long history of this, where he's perceiving something and it's not actually what's happening in real time, but he's perceiving it based on, not maybe understanding nonverbal social cues or the subtlety in speech or, things that people that don't have autism are able to easily pick up on.
It's probably things we just take for granted, but is this sort of just nuance in our social interactions, just something that it isn't there, either not picking up on a signal or not giving the right signal? Does that make sense?
Well, I think about it like this. So if you're a person that doesn't have autism, your factory setting, as I like to say, is you are pre-programmed to look at people in the face. You are pre-programmed to seek out information from somebody's body language, from the tone of their voice. When you have autism, your brain is not wired in that same way. So you're often missing that information. You're missing nonverbal social cues. You're missing subtleties that exist in communications between people. And when you miss that, you often miss a lot of the meaning that happens in a communication.
And you mentioned wiring. I mean, so we're talking about something that is essentially hardwired. We're just trying to best accommodate for it. Is that what we're doing?
Yes. Yes, and provide instruction.
What about like a history of rigid thinking, thought processes? I mean, is there that? Did you notice?
It appears that that's been a difficulty for him going back to the time he was very young, where he has become very fixated on something. And in the records I reviewed, he became very fixated on computer games and computer systems in general, and that it appears to me that for most of his life, this has been something that's been a very significant struggle for his family, for the placement he was in at the Echo Group Home, at Matanzas High School, where the electronics and his very extreme focus on electronics or gaming has caused a lot of difficulty, a lot of problems.
What about regulation of management of emotions? Has that been something you've learned he's struggled with?
Yes, by history.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, by history. He has had a very difficult time with regulating his emotional state, and so we refer to this as being emotionally dysregulated. And
you mentioned trouble with change or transitioning. I think you might have said, meaning what? Like, what's changing? What's transitioning?
So from transitioning is a couple of different things. Transitioning can be, I'm doing one thing and now I need to do another thing. It can also be a direct reference to you're physically in one place and you need to physically move to another place. And what we know about people with autism, in looking at peer-reviewed literature, and I can tell you in clinical practice, is that people with autism struggle to stop doing one thing to do another. It's difficult for them, even when it's something that they like doing. So there's an inherent difficulty in, even when I'm trying to get you from doing, playing this game to now playing this game, it's harder. And when we think about trying to move people or shift people or transition people from doing something that they're doing that they like to something that they are not going to like, it's exceptionally difficult, especially with a history of the rigidity.
And what does the difficulty manifest as? What does transition or change manifest as? Anger, frustration, like what does it look like?
It can look like a lot of different things. So depending on the individual, for some people, they're going to begin self-injurious behavior. It might start hitting themselves in the head, throw themselves on the floor. Some might start protesting, screaming, crying, and some become aggressive.
You mentioned electronics. Do you see any record evidence of that being appropriately used or managed or not?
I have to tell you, it was very concerning for me to read all the records and know the facts in this case. I could not understand why somebody that had a long history of difficulty with the removal of electronic devices, difficulty, aggression, well documented, why any program or any school would continue to allow him to have a gaming system. It was shocking to me.
Does that extend to just discipline surrounding electronics, whether it's physically taking it away or not, the topic of electronics?
Well, electronics are referred to in different ways throughout his records. When he was younger, they are referred to games, gaming systems, and then in some points they're referred to as him using, a PC or some kind of an actual computer, and in other references, just gaming systems in general. And again, it's concerning to me in reading records where he was in a group home. He was in a level 6 group home that's funded by APD, and they had to call a crisis team to remove his electronics. They talked specifically about that. In fact, they advised the school about this. He has these set times. I think it was 5 to 7 or 8 to, I may be getting the times wrong, but there are these specific times, and he's allowed to game, and when we're going to take the games away from him, we call in the crisis team.
So that was very specifically and narrowly tailored to a known problem.
Yes.
You're aware of additional diagnoses, ADHD, right, for Brendan?
Yes.
IED, intermittent explosive disorder.
Yes.
The disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, right?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion on that, or are you just aware of the prior diagnosis?
I'm aware of the prior diagnosis.
Okay. Is that common for someone with autism, that there's also there's cluster at the center of the Venn diagram? Is there a lot of overlap there?
So there's a very high proportionate rate of co-occurring disorders with autism. The two that happen most frequently are anxiety and depression. Those both appear to be lifelong issues for Brandon, and they have been, I believe they have manifested themselves in different ways. We do frequently see people with autism who continue to have difficulty with behavioral management, behavioral outbursts. We see a higher proportionate rate of those folks having co-occurring mental health disorders.
And you specifically here, you believe that this is these co-occurring disorders in addition to autism affected, right?
Absolutely.
There had been some questioning, I think it was of Dr. Pritchard by Ms. Clark, about, I think it was in Brendan's interview with Dr. Pritchard, about him blaming Ms. Natick, or I think it was a reference to she could have done some things better too, or something like along those lines. Do you see this the same way, that he's blaming her?
I don't view it as blaming. I view it as he has a very rigid way of thinking about things. In his world, things are very black and white. They're either in this category or they're in this category. And I know in his history, he's had difficulty with kind of seeing things, and this is central coherence deficit, is kind of seeing the big picture of things. He gets very myopic and focused on one part of it. And in speaking with him and talking to him about what happened, because I did ask him what happened, I let him know I had reviewed the records and I wanted to hear his perspective. It felt to me during the interview that he had with me, where he's giving me the facts. He's not necessarily assigning blame to Ms. Nadich. He's just giving the facts of why he believes an incident, why something occurred, why this happened.
Autism standing alone, of course that's not the case here, but does autism itself usually result in aggressive behavior, or is it this combination we're talking about?
So a lot of people with autism experience at some point in their lives or express aggression. And aggression happens for different reasons. There's different functions for aggression. Some aggression is related to people who are not able to vocalize their needs, so they may become aggressive. Some aggression is related to sensory-based difficulties, so they become very overwhelmed by noise in the environment or a lot of commotion, and we heard about this a little bit earlier, and they may become aggressive in the face of that. Sometimes it's sheer frustration, so there's different reasons, but many children that have autism express aggression. It's a pretty common thing, but there are different reasons for it.
We heard Dr. Pritchard agree with the conclusion that these events were a manifestation of disability. Do you agree with that as well?
Yes.
And is it all these perturbations of normal that we're talking about, the IED, the DMDD, et cetera, in combination?
I think you have to, I look at Brandon as a person that's neurologically compromised. He is somebody who had a very difficult beginning. There's some certainly genetic things at play, and even though a family adopted him that had his best interest, very well-meaning, and tried their best, he has autism and he has other mental health disorders. So he's got this constellation of things that are happening. In addition to that, he's experienced trauma. He has, in different ways, experienced trauma, and without getting into an entire list. So you have all these different things impacting a young man. And while I understand that Brandon is a very large person, he's still a young man. And at the time that this incident occurred, he was a young man. He was a 17-year-old young man who had been in an institutional setting for nearly a year, had been in a group home for nearly 2, where I think a lot of people were trying to do their best, but I think it's important to bear in mind that there was just a lot of changes. There were difficulty with staffing at the group home. There were just things that happened where there was just this constellation of changes, which I think was really difficult for him. And I think in reading the documentation, in speaking to him, and in knowing all the pieces I know, he, on the date of this incident, he was hungry. On the date of this incident, some different things happened. And again, I look at it as the perfect storm. So with all of these things that were already present, and just kind of one more thing happening here and one more thing happening here, and I believe that's what contributed to what happened.
There seemed to be some intimation that he can control his anger, that he's just bad, perhaps, is the conclusion that was sought to be drawn. But do you see it? Is that simple? Is that straight a line?
No.
Why not?
I think he has difficulty, and it's very clear throughout his history that he has had difficulty at times with managing his emotions and managing his frustration. And I don't have the impression that that is fully under his control all the time.
Do you believe that he is inherently dangerous?
Can you be more specific about that?
Without the right support in place. So let's start with a baseline understanding that you need people in his orbit that know him well.
Yes.
That know triggers.
Highly trained staff.
Highly trained. Whomever that is. Given, if people have the right knowledge and implement the knowledge, is he dangerous in that scenario?
I think in having proper supports in place, having staff, family members who are known to him, people around him who know how to manage his behavior. And part of this too is going to be intervention and education, helping him learn how to recognize his internal states. There's just a lot of things that I believe need to happen. If all of the right things are in place, mental health treatment, medication management, therapeutic intervention, a stable living environment, that would dramatically and should dramatically reduce any concerns about behavior.
Are there any other?
Judge, Dr. Spence, I think, is doing a fantastic job of really educating this court about what autism is and what this young man might be dealing with. She mentioned something about level 6 group home. He had been apparently in a group home for 2 years. Again, he was adopted by his current mother, who actually testified earlier. You're someone who's very familiar with this whole area of the law, and not even outside the law, just dealing with children. Talk to me about level 6 group homes. What are we talking about?
Sure. Well, first of all, these things are privatized in the state of Florida. Every state's a little bit different. And the important piece is the extent to which they can provide the treatment, the restrictions to ensure he is safe, everyone else is safe, and he gets all the treatment. You heard the adoptive mother testify earlier. I want him home. Yes. I want him to come home. The problem is all those same services may not be available to a private home, and that's why she's detailing this is what we can do. If he resists returning a game, which very restricted time on a game, we have a team that can come in to address that for everyone's safety.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a difficult decision for the judge because, as Dr. Spence was testifying, he needs an environment with the proper medication, the proper therapy, the proper folks around him, trained people to help him integrate back into society. It's a big thing.
It's a big thing, absolutely. And this judge has a huge decision in front of him because there's so many options before him as to what's best. All right, we need to squeeze in a break. When we come back, of course, we're going to take you back into the sentencing hearing. We're hearing a lot of great information. Tell us what you think his sentence should be.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the latest developments in true crime stories from across the country, plus in-depth analysis from our legal experts.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
The Dad in the Ditch murder trial. What to know before we take you inside the courtroom each day. Plus, what's trending in true crime with a deep dive into unsolved cases.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Back now to Florida, where a sentencing hearing is underway for an autistic teen.
Brendan Depa, who was 17 at the time, beat his teacher unconscious over a Nintendo Switch last year.
Depa was charged as an adult and pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated battery of a school employee in October.
Now, Depa faces up to 30 years in prison if he's sentenced as an adult, but the judge also has the option of sentencing him as a juvenile, which could mean a very different sentence for him.
Yeah, and under the guidelines, just to be clear, he's facing 30, but because he's a first-time offender, et cetera, under the guidelines, he would face about 34, 35 months, which comes out to about 2.87 years. So just so we're clear as to how this all works.
And he's been in jail since this happened, February of 2023, so, 18
That's about
months.
18 months, about half the time. All right, let's get you back into court now, where autism disorder specialist Kimberly Spence is on direct examination by the defense.
Haven't fully been talked about enough? Is there anything else that jumped out at you?
There are several references, and I heard some discussion related to voices, and I'm certainly not qualified to weigh in on that topic. However, it appears for several years there's been discussions about him hearing voices. He related to me that he heard voices, and again, I'm not qualified to enter into, it's not my area of expertise. However, I would say that needs to be understood, and whether that's psychosis, whether that's the beginning of schizophrenia, whether that's maladaptive behavior, that needs to be better understood for intervention. So whether that has some kind of a neurologic underpinning or etiology, or it's maladaptive behavior related to what's happening in the environment, we need to understand that.
And address it.
Correct. Right. Correct.
And you indicated that records reflected that that's been a years-long claim. This is not some recent development, right? I
saw the beginnings of that, I want to say in 2018, 2019. Yes, it's gone on long before this incident.
Does his history of seizures factor in at all here, or is that just something physical that really isn't in play here?
It does factor in here, yeah, certainly. So what we know about people who have seizure disorder, which is a very broad category, typically this is something that can impact behavior. And once you've had one seizure, you certainly could be at risk of having one again at any time. I didn't review any medical records related to that, but what we know in general is that when you have a seizure disorder or you have experienced seizures, there's often maladaptive behavior that can happen as a result.
They often go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Brendan was placed as a result of ECHO's directive. He was placed back in the public school setting. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes.
What was that placement? Like, what was in play there in the school to deal with it?
So according to the record, he was placed into what's called a self-contained classroom. And a self-contained classroom means it is a smaller size classroom, meaning there are fewer students and there are more staff. So typically you have one or more teachers and you have one or more paraprofessionals and you have a smaller number of students. That may involve a specialized curriculum within that classroom setting. I believe he was placed based on the label of other health impaired into that classroom, but he spent most of his time in that classroom. I know he did go out for the computer class that I believe was mentioned previously, but he spent the predominant amount of time within that classroom.
So smaller population and then more individualized attention, right? Is there one-on-one support in those classes?
He was assigned a one-to-one paraprofessional. Which I believe was recommended by the group home, if I'm not mistaken.
And in your experience, the people that are dealing with him, paraprofessionals included, require an intimate knowledge of him, her, whomever it is, correct?
They should, yes.
To include the IEP and the behavior support plan incorporated into it?
Absolutely. So as a teacher who would be the direct person in charge of running and being responsible for a self-contained classroom, part of your job is making sure that the paraprofessionals understand the directiveness and directives on the IEP and that they understand the behavior intervention plan, or the BIP. So there's the IEP, and the BIP is a part of the IEP. So part of the responsibility of the teacher or the teacher of charge, however that's referred to, is to make sure that the paraprofessional understands what that plan is, understands how to implement it, and with any behavior intervention plan, data has to be collected. And for his behavior intervention plan, there specifically were data they were collecting related to specific behaviors they were tracking. As a part of that plan, there are preventative-based strategies that are articulated in the plan. Try this, say it this way, don't do this, offer this incentive or this reward, and or the identification of things that are problematic, known things that may be triggers or a problem for that student.
And then sprinkled on top of all this, of course, is ECHO is on standby with a crisis intervention team.
In the 2 years preceding the incident, I saw several meetings. There was a meeting in March of 2021 where they said to the school staff, we will come and get him.
All right, so his issues well documented. Folks were aware that these things were going on. A little bit of a history of violence, as we know. Let's bring in our guest, National Trial Attorney David Yenna. David, this is a difficult one. This judge has a tough decision to make. There are a lot of competing concerns here. No one can deny the brutality of this attack and the effect it had on the victim. But what the defense is doing here is presenting some mitigating factors, I think is a good way of suggesting what they're trying to show this judge is that there are some underlying factors here that may have caused him to act in this way, and that he needs to take these into account when he considers his sentence. What do you make of all this and the difficulty of this for the judge under these circumstances?
So I'm not here as an expert in autism and ADHD, but I can tell you I have several family members with it, so I have personal experience with this, including a young son. And I can tell you this is extremely important. This man did something that was brutal. This young man did something that was brutal, and the victim is paying for it. I don't want to diminish that, but he needs help. He doesn't need a jail cell. So all of these is pivotal to help the judge understand that, and I think it's extremely important that the judge takes great care in really studying this issue, because in my opinion, this is not this young man's fault that this happened. And he needs the care and the help and the treatment and the guidance and the medication to make sure that he gets the care to move forward and live a life in a jail cell is just not the place for him to do that.
And I'm going to push back a little bit. I do agree that this is something that can be considered a mitigating factor, but I also feel, and I want you to weigh in, David, on this is something that they are trying to spoon feed the judge and say, Judge, here's an option. Go with the juvenile sentencing route, not the adult. And by doing that and selecting a group home that's level 6, we can do all of these things, all of these services. And I think trying to give an out to the judge instead of sentencing him as an adult, given that's what the defense wants.
Yeah, I think that's really their only option here. Again, if it was up to me, the guidelines would allow him not to be in the jail cell. But I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to give the judge that avenue by presenting the evidence in the way that they are. And I think they're doing a great job at it. And then that's what they need to do to defend their client.
Michael, I just have to follow up and ask you, autism spectrum, do you think that that is a mitigating factor? Because I was a little on the edge, and then we talked about it, and I thought, well, yeah, you convinced me. I think it is, clearly.
Yeah, I think it is, but this case is complicated because we've already heard testimony from state experts who think that he might be malingering, that he's not nearly as debilitated as he comes off, and that he uses that as an excuse to act out in the ways that he wants to act out and get the things he wants to get. So there is a competing thing here, and he told folks prior to this attack that he didn't want a teacher's assistant in the room. So this may not have even been about the switch. He just may have been mad that a teacher's assistant was in the room. That's a very good point. So there are other things to consider here, and again, that's what makes this so complicated.
Yeah, I agree with you. This judge is going to have a lot to decide.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right, let's take a break here. David, stand by. When we come back, we'll have more from that courtroom. So keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott here with Michael Ayala. Thank you both, all, not both. Thank us both. Thank you all for joining us.
We have more than 2 viewers.
I don't know what's going on today. It's like a Friday in my world. Hopefully. All right. Court TV is bringing you the case against Brendan Depa out of Florida this afternoon. He's the teen who has autism who pled guilty to beating a teacher's aide over a Nintendo Switch last year. And here you can see that video that's hard to watch.
Yeah, it's awful. All right, let's go back to court now to hear more from the autism disorder specialist, Kimberly Spence. She's testifying on behalf of the defense.
Of 2021, where they said the same thing. They expressed concern about the electronics. We go into March of 2022. There were several concerns that were expressed. And again, reiterating saying to the school-based staff, if there are any issues, call us immediately. They also, I believe, in that March of 2022 meeting, shared with the school staff This was what I was talking about with respect to removing electronics and needing a crisis team. Sharing with the school team that was present for that IEP, he's been restrained under these circumstances. These are the things that have happened that have caused a difficult time or difficulty with him.
If a professional, if a paraprofessional engaging with Brendan was not aware of the IEP, nor aware of the behavior, the preventative strategies, is that appropriate in your estimation?
Absolutely not.
For reasons we've talked about?
It's dangerous.
As far as the strategies that we're talking about that work their way into the behavior plan, what specifically, to the extent that you can remember, I know there was 25 or so of them, what specifically here was most pertinent?
His plan was very comprehensive. I will say what stood out to me was the list, the very clearly articulated list of triggers, things that were known to be troublesome, that were known to cause him to escalate, that were known to be, if he was spoken to in a certain way, that was known to cause aggression. The fact that multiple times in multiple conference notes, documentation, IEP, and the behavior plans, it said, do not correct him in front of other students. Choosing your words, offering him basically not, and I don't use the word confront, but essentially being very cautious about how you're interacting with that student, not reacting. So often when students who have behavioral difficulty are reacting, what as a teacher and as a paraprofessional, and what a behavior analyst will tell you, you have to ignore, you have to stay very calm, very cool. There was a lot of documentation in his records that was saying those same things over and over again about being cautious, about how he was spoken to, and the circumstances under which anybody would give him a directive.
And based on your review of the records and the descriptions therein about how these events unfolded, were strategies employed, were triggers recognized?
It does not appear so to me.
The state is requesting that Brendan be sent to prison. Do you believe that is the optimal environment for Brendan?
I do not.
Why? Will he receive the treatment he needs?
I do not believe he will receive the treatment he needs, and the things that are happening in Brendan's behavior, incarcerating him, is not going to change the factors that precipitate that behavior. He needs therapeutic intervention, and he needs to be provided with mental health treatment. There are several things that need to happen that will not happen in a prison setting. He needs cognitive behavioral therapy. He needs, I think, psychodynamic therapy would be helpful, ongoing counseling. There are many things I think would be very helpful and would assist him in improving his behavior.
There's multiple layers to this, it sounds like.
Yes.
You heard that there's the testimony about some sort of apparatus in place in the Department of Corrections to address mental health. Do the interventions you just...
You know, Michael, we're talking about it here and you hear it there, which is we're talking about, are there these services available if he remains incarcerated? This particular witness says no, not the mental health services and therapeutic treatment that he needs.
Yeah, apparently there is a big difference between being in jail where he is now and has been for the last 18 months and state prison, which is where you would go when he gets sentenced.
Yeah, good points. All right, we're going to hit the pause button. When we come back, we'll get you back in for more of the sentencing hearing. Stay tuned.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the latest developments in true crime stories from across the country, plus in-depth analysis from our legal experts.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV. Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9, 8 Central, only on Court TV.
Autistic teen Brendan Depa is facing 30 years in prison today after beating his teacher last year.
And we're getting right back into court for more testimony from a specialist called by the defense. She's an autism disorder specialist, and she's testifying about where the best place for Brendan Depa is. Let's get back in.
Trying to get attention, and while it may look very inappropriate to everyone else, it may not behavior any of us would engage in terms of trying to engage someone. They're motivated by the engagement.
And you would agree that Mr. Depa has shown aggressive behaviors or tendencies in basically every environment he's been in, whether it's home, hospital, or group home and school, that he's been showing aggressive tendencies or behaviors in each of those settings?
I believe that's true.
And would you agree that he's dangerous?
I think without proper supports, he's dangerous.
Okay. And you would agree that over the course of time, there's been an attempt to provide just that, right? With Springbrook, ECHO, IEPs, there were attempts made to provide support to prevent these types of behaviors.
Well, I wasn't at Springbrook, so I can't speak for them. What I can say about ECHO was in the documentation, there were problems with staffing, with the consistent implementation of his behavior plan. Those were also concerns that were documented at school. I wasn't at any of those places physically. I can only tell you in the records, it doesn't appear that some of these places were consistent in implementing his behavior plan, in providing him with the kinds of instruction that was likely needed to affect a meaningful behavioral change.
And even spending a year in a residential treatment facility for autism, that still didn't presumably provide him the tools necessary to prevent aggressive behavior, because here we are, correct?
Well, sending somebody to a residential treatment, again, we would need to understand what actually happened in that environment. I worked in a residential treatment program for a period with people with autism. I saw staff that were not prepared. I saw people that were not implementing plans that there were a lot of things that happened that I think accounted for why clients weren't being successful, and I've seen it over the course of my career. I wasn't there, so I can't speak for what they did or they didn't do, but I would not assume that somebody who was high needs and demonstrating a lot of aggression would go to a place and they would magically, in a short period of time, all that would go away. That doesn't seem appropriate.
And you mentioned that you didn't believe prison would be an appropriate setting for him. And were you present when Dr. Klein testified regarding what they do and don't have?
I was.
Okay. And you would agree that they do have cognitive behavioral therapy at the prison, is that correct?
They offer some based on what may be happening for a client at the moment, but in an ongoing way for an individual in targeted treatment, it's not my understanding that that is offered.
Okay. And have you worked in the prison system?
I've been in and out of prisons to provide training, to support clients on many occasions.
Okay. And you would agree that there are several defendants that with autism or intellectual disabilities that have in fact been sentenced to prison, correct?
That is,
the state of Florida?
That is correct.
And presumably the Department of Corrections has handled or been equipped to deal with those individuals that have been sentenced into their facilities.
I can't speak to what level of training they receive. I know I provide training along with first responders and have trained many corrections officers and have heard many times that they don't feel adequately trained. I can't speak for all corrections officers across the state, but I've heard many times people saying they wish they had more training.
In looking at some of the school records from Matanzas, it appears as though obviously due to his high IQ, he was able obviously to leave the primary classroom and go to an outside class. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'm not sure how they made the determination for him to go to the computer class, so I'm not sure if I can speak to that.
Okay. It looked like his testing within the school system indicated he had a very high score for reading, vocab, and comprehension. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
Okay. And that prior to this altercation with the victim in this case, you had spoken briefly about there had been an altercation on a bus. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
And I think that occurred in December of 21?
I believe so.
And
all right, let's bring back in our guest, national trial attorney David Yenna. David, you know, as I continue to hear this and we look at all sides of this thing, I think philosophically it comes down to an important question, and I want to get your thoughts on it. You know, what is incarceration or what is punishment about? Is it about punishment and retribution for the victim in this case, or is this about rehabilitation? Can both of those things happen in jail, or do they look different? Those are big questions in this case.
It's a very fair point, and the victim and what they and their family want from this matters, and the judge has to hear those points as well. But in this case, one of mental health issues is this person is mentally disabled. So any treatment or any sentence needs to make sure that he's getting the help he needs, and you know, with strict probation guidelines on making sure that he's getting the care he needs to make sure the public is safe from him as well. There's that balance as well. You know, how can you foresee and make sure that you have the right guidelines in place so that he doesn't do this again? So all those things need to be balanced. It's a very tough decision for a judge to make.
But even regardless of the decision the judge does make, David, the thing that's hard is we have no idea what he's going to be like after his sentence. We have no idea, because this witness just agreed without proper support and supervision, he's dangerous. And the reality is you can't predict behavior even after the services. So do you really focus on the fact he's only 17? That's, you know, theoretically those brains aren't developed. You should be able to help him.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond just his age. You know, he does need long-term care, and that's where I was mentioning, you know, the probation guidelines here to ensure that he has that care and he's getting the right treatment and he is safe for the public, I think is very important as part of the sentencing.
David, you know, the fact that he's 17, you know, if you have experience with autism, you know that sometimes these kids can grow out of this stuff, or at least a lot of these types of anxieties, behaviors, they tend to and move towards a more sort of neurotypical existence. He does have a 97 IQ. So if you take those things into account, and some of the things I mentioned earlier, the idea that the state presented evidence that, at least according to their expert, he thinks there might be some malingering going on, there might be excuses for this type of behavior, and this attack itself might have been a targeted attack rather than some trigger because of this Nintendo Switch. When you start hearing those things, does that change the way you look at this case?
It's definitely a factor. All those things need to be taken into account. But at the end of the day, he has very documented history, medical history here, and those are things that can't be ignored and can't be made up. So I think that takes importance.
All right. Thank you so much, David Yenna, for joining us this hour.
All right, folks, stick around. Coming up, more from the sentencing hearing for Brendan Depa. We'll be right back with more. So keep it on Court TV, the front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala.
And I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. We begin tonight with day 2 of a sentencing hearing in the beaten teacher trial in Florida. Brendan Depa, who has autism, could face prison time for beating a teacher's aide unconscious over a Nintendo Switch.
Now, earlier today, his mother testified and pleaded with the judge to let her son come home. The judge also heard from a defense expert who testified about what she believes caused Depa to act out.
Testimony is still continuing. Let's get you back inside the courtroom where autism disorder specialist Kimberly Spence is on cross-examination.
It was a quite long physical fight with the defendant and another student. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Like 10, 15 17 minutes, something like that. It took quite a bit to de-escalate that situation.
I believe that's correct.
And in that particular situation, did you see in the records that in that situation, the defendant, Mr. Depa, didn't show any remorse for that either?
I don't recall seeing any comment about it.
And you would agree that, in your opinion, Mr. Depa needs long-term supervision and care, is that correct?
I believe he needs intensive intervention and support.
Okay. So for example, if sentenced as a juvenile, they lose jurisdiction at 21 years of age. Mr. Depa is currently 19, so it'd be 2 years. Would you agree that would not be enough time to monitor him?
I'm not qualified to answer that.
Well, you're suggesting that he needs all these supports and that this is a lifelong issue for Mr. Depa, correct?
Autism is a lifelong issue, yes.
Right. And that, in your opinion, he needs a variety of supports in order to prevent him from harming somebody else. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And would you agree that those supports likely are going to take more than 2 years in order to teach him and modify his behavior?
I think in the sense that this is going to be an ongoing process of helping him to understand where he is with respect to his internal state is going to take a good period of time. How long? I can't say. He's a bright person, so my hope would be that with appropriate intervention and monitoring that he can learn those skills. I think the ongoing pieces will be the mental health portions, so depression or other things that may be affecting him, and that's where I feel it's harder for me to speak to that, but I think he needs support in several different areas. I would hope that with intensive treatment, applied behavioral analysis, the mental health treatment, as I was discussing before, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, medication management, and again, I feel like a comprehensive neurological evaluation. I still am not convinced that we know everything we need to know in terms of providing him with appropriate treatment.
And you would agree that these sorts of interventions started with Mr. Depa when he was sent to Springbrook well, even probably before then, but certainly by the time he went to Springbrook in 2019. So we're going back to 2019 with a variety of interventions and supports for him. And yet that still wasn't enough time to prevent what happened in this case, correct?
Well, if we go back and we look historically, he went to Springbrook when he was 14, 15, and he's there for a year. So he gets there, I believe he was in some kind of, because of the pandemic, isolation for a period, but we're not talking probably a relatively long amount of time, and then he's sent to ECHO, where, near as I can tell, they went through several different staffing changes and changes within that environment. He also started high school in an online capacity. Then he was going in person. You know, some of this for a juvenile I would expect is also happening at school. So I think in the volume of treatment, I don't think it's been enough to date.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that even with all of that, over the course of those years, that still was not sufficient. So wouldn't you agree that if we only had 2 years to work with if he was sentenced as a juvenile, that's not going to be sufficient?
I'm saying that over the course of the last several years, I don't think the level of treatment has been adequate to address his needs. So it's hard for me to say in this amount of time or in that amount of time. I don't believe that from the time he went into treatment, and I wasn't there to know what they did or didn't, I can look at the records, but I don't know the day-to-day, it feels to me that he's not had the level of adequate treatment of people understanding autism, mental health, and again, if there's anything else that's happening for him that we don't understand.
So even Springbrook, which specializes in autism, you don't think they had the proper training to address this?
I've been to many programs that advertise that they directly support people with autism or they provide mental health care, and when you go visit those programs, they're not fantastic.
And have you visited Springbrook?
I have not.
So you can't speak to them?
I've said repeatedly I can't speak to what they did.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tyke.
A few questions. If indeed the Department of Juvenile Justice has a identified, recognized program for Brendan that, granted, would have a shelf life of 2 years, if we're talking about rehabilitation, does that set him up as good as anything else for the rest of his life?
It could.
Does it set him up, in your estimation, better than 5 or 10 years in the Department of Corrections and their mental health apparatus?
Yes.
Do you have any doubt about that?
No.
The mention in Dr. Cutlick's report, did you read that report? That was part of the sentencing recommendation from DJJ, I believe.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And what was alluded to as some of this maladaptive behavior was self-reporting, correct?
Yes.
Was there any other record evidence anywhere of any of this other conduct? Harm to animals?
Not that I saw, no, not that I saw.
And it's true that Dr. Cutlick did not conclude, based on that and everything else, that there is a conduct disorder that needed to be addressed.
Correct.
Correct, right?
Correct.
These were simply things that Brendan had said in the course of this interview, right?
Presumably, yes.
Okay. And you heard when Dr. Pritchard was testifying, Brendan made reference to, he told Dr. Pritchard that he was hearing voices, correct?
That's correct.
And Dr. Pritchard did not accept that at face value, right?
He testified that he did not.
Right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Spence, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so what's interesting, Judge, is that we're hearing that he needs this sort of holistic care. And there's a question, at least according to this witness, as to whether he can get that in prison. But I still submit to you that under the circumstances where you have a video of this event, and it is an assault on a school official, which we know under Florida law makes things more serious. If it's an assault, that's a 3rd-degree felony, it goes to a 2nd-degree felony. More time, more serious. When you sort of balance those two things, it feels to me like there needs to be some level of incarceration.
Sure, I do understand why you're saying that. First, I just have to mention that holistic approach. This witness did a phenomenal job, did she not, of all of the different things he needs, not just one, like there's Springbrook for autism in jail. That may not be enough. Putting that aside, don't forget he's been in jail for almost 18 months. And as you mentioned earlier, we know under the sentencing guidelines, the lowest permissible amount that he would serve if sentenced as an adult is about twice that, 34.5 months. So half of that time he's already been in jail. Might the judge say he has been in jail for half this time? Now let's try to rehabilitate him and put him in, for instance, the group home level 6 with all these different services. And here's what I really wonder. We know who's coming up next. Leanne Depa, the adoptive mother, is coming back into court on the stand. Is she going to be that final decision-making testimony for the judge?
Now, she testified already. She wants him to come home, is what she said. What the defense, I would imagine they're going to do, is they're going to have her explain some of the things she might be able to give him while he's at home. So let's go back into court now and listen to what Leanne Depa has to say.
Brendan have access to any animals in his life?
The only access Brendan had to animals was in my home.
Okay, and what animals?
I have 5 cats.
Has Brendan ever harmed one of the cats?
The most that Brendan has ever done to a cat is hiss at a cat. That Brendan loves the cats. He's devastated when any cat is sick. He's called and asked over and over again about the cat. He has trauma from one of his cats that he loved dying. Brendan has never, ever harmed an animal.
Thank you.
Okay.
Clerk, any questions?
No, thank you.
May step down. Thank you.
Interesting, Michael.
Yeah, the whole point of her, and it was to talk about this whole animal thing.
Yep. He's never hurt the cats. The most he's done is hissed.
Right, because we know that's kind of a sign of something much worse.
Yeah, if they're
much beyond
hurting animals.
Autism,
Yes.
hurting animals. Well, let's bring in our guest. Joining us to discuss this hour is National Trial Attorney Michael Depa. Michael, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us on the program. I want to get your general thoughts about what's happening here. We've sort of outlined this for the last hour or so. You have on the one hand a young man, 17 years old at the time of the crime, but also now about 19 years old, been in jail for about 18 months or so. The question is, what should the judge do in this case?
I was hoping you'd ask that question because I want another opportunity to say how difficult it is to be a judge. This is actually a very difficult decision, and here's why. This judge is going to have a decision that's going to transcend what he does in this case. Here's why. He knows, the judge knows that eventually they're going to have to release this person. They're not going to be able to keep this kid in jail for 100 years. They're eventually going to have to let him go. And so the question then becomes, what will happen? What's the chance of recidivism? What's the chance of him harming somebody in the future? Because if we release this kid in 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be, what if he harms somebody? What if he does something more severe? And the reason that becomes so complicated is because you're seeing them now deal with an issue within an issue. What do I mean by that? Mental health is an issue, but autism is a separate issue within that issue because there's bipolar, there's schizophrenia, there's depression, there's manic depressive, there's a lot of mental health disorders, but almost all of them have medication and treatment. Autism does not. And so how do you know, if you're the judge, that this person's not going to come out and lash out 10 years from now, 5 years from now, right? It would be a little less complicated if this person was dealing with severe bipolar, manic depression, schizophrenia, right? Some of these disorders even can go away over time. There's theories that say that schizophrenia goes away when you hit 40, right? And even if it doesn't go away, there's medication, there's injections, there's ways to have, a guardian ad litem. There's treatment, but autism does not. And so this is significantly complicated. And that's why I believe that they had to postpone the sentencing and they had to really, really do their homework because we all know that the people within our ecosystem, within the jurisprudence system, try to protect the public and also try to protect their reputations when they make decisions. And if you decide to let this person go after a certain amount of time, it's on you. And one more complicating thing is the Baker Act, which in Florida, the Baker Act makes it theoretically possible. It's highly unlikely, theoretically possible to keep this kid in prison for decades if he needs more and more treatment. Again, it's theoretically possible. I don't know if it's ever been done. But in Florida, they have a special act to guide what the practitioners in the mental health system do. There's stringent laws. This young man is going to have right to counsel. He's going to have many appeals.
Yeah, and
so
Mike,
this judge is going to have a very difficult
one
decision.
second. He was, in fact, Baker acted at one point.
Yeah, he was. He was, and he did. But I just have to add to that. Listen, the environment of a group home versus a prison and how he's going to be treated, we have to take that into account, too, because it may be the way he's treated in prison causes him to react with violence, which spirals downward in terms of his abilities when he gets out.
Yeah, again, just so many factors to consider.